Good afternoon. For more than a decade, the Wallace Foundation has supported efforts to improve school leadership in public schools. In addition to funding projects in over 28 states and numerous school districts within them, Wallace has issued more than 70 research reports and other publications covering school leadership on topics ranging from how principals are trained to how they are evaluated on the job. Through all this work, we've learned a great deal about the nature of the school principal's role, what makes for an effective principal, and how to tie principal effectiveness to improve student achievement. And the particularly noteworthy finding is that the empirical link between school leadership and improved student achievement is very, very closely related. The Wallace perspective summarizes research and work in school leadership to identify what it is that effective school principals do. It concludes that they carry out 5 key actions particularly well, including shaping a vision of academic success for all students and cultivating leadership in others. The real tipping point is to bring together these 5 elements in a strategic way within the context of their unique school and community. Today, our presenters, our experts, will tell from their perspective in working in various demographic environments to bring the principal practices alive. As each presenter shares their position on exemplary leadership, the audience will see how the 5 key practices cannot be viewed as isolated skills or standards. Before we begin our webinar, we're going to take a quick poll of the audience. Please read and answer this question. Which of the following principal behaviors is most important to creating an environment for school success? To take a few seconds and read through those 5 principal behaviors. Which one of those do you believe is the most important to creating an environment for school success? While you are doing that, I would like to introduce our presenters today. First, we have Catherine Missy Leonard, who has 21 years of experience as an educator and 13 years as an elementary school administrator. For the past 10 years, Missy has served as a principal for Hillsborough County Public Schools. Missy has mentored many aspiring and early career administrators going through the Hillsborough Principal Pipeline, which is funded by a grant from the Wallace Foundation. She is very passionate about empowering teachers and growing positive school cultures. So we're happy to welcome Missy as one of our experts today. Another expert, Missy's colleague, is Dr. Julie Hassan. She hails from a long family of educators. Julie has been a school administrator for 8 years and is currently principal of Sims Elementary in Riverview, Florida. Julie completed her doctorate dissertation in illuminating the transition from teacher to administrator. As part of Hillsborough County's Principal Pipeline, Julia served as a trained mentor for new administrators. She is passionate about inspiring and motivating school leaders so that they can develop the mental and emotional agility to sustain the role and positively impact both students and teachers. With Julie and Missy's presentation today, you will see the connection through their stories and real-life experiences to really reinforce that mental attitude around resiliency and emotional agility to do the work that you do every day.
Okay, with that, if you haven't finished doing your poll, please take a moment to finish that and we will close it and show you the results. All right.
Our results show that 36% of the audience states that the most important behavior is exhibiting resiliency and situational awareness as a change agent. So clearly the audience agrees with our presenters today. 27% has communicated the second most effective behavior listed is the communication skills, and tied with that is leading with a strong vision and strong beliefs about community. Fourth place was demonstrating knowledge of curriculum, and no one selected displays management skills. I don't think that's a surprise to any of us. So thank you for sharing that, and we will come back to that later in our presentation. Here is Missy Leonard, principal at Stowers Elementary School, and Julie Hassan, principal of Sims Elementary School in Hillsborough County Public Schools, Florida. I'm very proud to introduce them and will now turn the webinar over to them.
Thank you, Carol and Honor, and welcome fellow principals and school leaders. It looks from that poll like we have some like-minded friends with us at our webinar today, because one of the things we're really going to highlight is leader resiliency and leader energy, and how we move ourselves to the right state to really positively impact schools and kids. So as Carol said, in today's webinar, you're going to get some specific strategies and practices that will help you consistently enact the 5 keys, because we can all enact them inconsistently and periodically, but to make sure that we enact them every day in a very purposeful way, we have to use some strategies and practices that keep them in the forefront of our mind as we plan and move through the day. As Carol said, these 5 keys were identified in the Wallace report, Principal as Leader, Guiding Schools to Better Teaching and Learning. Next. Let's start with 2 key findings from that report. The first is the empirical link between principal quality and student learning. The second is the finding that principal practices are the second greatest school-related factor in influencing student learning. So these 2 pieces really highlight the critical role that school leaders play in setting the conditions for learning and moving learning forward at a school. Next. And here are the 5 key practices laid out again. Stop and reflect for just a moment. How much of your day was spent enacting any of these key practices? The importance of a principal's leadership is no surprise to those of us who work in a school. We would be challenged to find any truly great school without a great leader. So what is the cost to a school when the principal feels overwhelmed, defeated, or even downright exhausted? Next. These 2 pieces of evidence are from the 2013 MetLife Survey of the American Teacher. It uncovered these 2 trends as it relates to the principal's perception of their role. The first is that our roles are becoming more complex. The second is that there is an increased level of stress in our roles. These findings are also not surprising to those of us who work in schools. So if we know that quality leadership is critical for student learning, what can we do to support the well-being and resiliency needed for effective leadership? Next. The key is helping principals lead more purposefully. To do this, we need to reduce reactivity and intentionally increase positive impact on our school and our students. The content of our presentation today is organized in the acronym PURPOSEFUL to help you remember the strategies and practices. So let's get started. Next. Have you ever had one of those days when you were busy but felt you had accomplished nothing? Maybe you were driven by the demands of others or just stuck in a state of reacting. The opposite of this is leading purposefully. Leading purposefully is essential to consistently enacting the 5 keys. Thomas Carlyle said it best, a person without purpose is like a ship without a rudder. Think of being purposeful in terms of this equation. Purposeful is setting an intention plus focusing attention. Let's define these components separately. An intention is just a framework for creating a new reality or creating the positive outcome you desire. For example, my intention this year has been to support and grow student engagement at my school. In past years, I've had intentions to increase inclusion for some of our physically impaired students, and increase collaboration on teacher teams, increase authentic parent input. What is your intention for this school year? It is likely related to one of the 5 keys of principal practice. Remember that intentions become more powerful with clarity, especially if you put them in writing and share them with others on your team. But remember, intentions without actions are nothing more than wishes. Focused attention is what keeps you moving in the direction of realizing this positive outcome. To illustrate these concepts, I will share with you 2 contrasting days in my principalship. These days are loosely based on reality. So first, let's examine a day when I did not act purposefully. On this particular day, I got up late, threw on some clothes, grabbed a cup of caffeine and one of the kids' Pop-Tarts, and raced down the road. I became frustrated at every red light, knowing I was becoming later and later. I had to rush into the building, put my things down, and head out to car line duty. I usually like to be out at the car loop greeting students in the morning, but this particular morning had not gotten off to a good start. Approximately 10 minutes before the first bell, I saw a car cut across the car loop and parked diagonally on the side. A father and his kindergartner ran through the morning traffic, dodging the moving cars. When I stopped the father to remind him of the procedure and inform him that his actions were unsafe, his face grew red and he angrily told me that he was in a hurry to get to work. And then he shouted, "Listen, I don't get to just stand out here and watch the cars go by all morning. Why don't you get a real job?" Well, I quickly reacted. My voice raised in turn, and I informed him that I could have his car towed. I'm not proud of that moment, although it felt a little good at the time. Throughout the day, I perseverated on the issue with this father. I complained to everyone, from the custodian to the lunchroom attendant. I even discussed the matter with the driver making a delivery to the school. When I went to a meeting in the afternoon, instead of focusing on the content of the meeting, I continued to focus on the morning's encounter with that dad. At the end of the day, I felt drained. I had spent all of my energy on this father and his angry words, and I had accomplished nothing that significantly impacted my students. I had completely lost focus and made no progress on my intention of increasing student engagement at my school. Let's contrast that with how the day could have gone if I had acted more purposefully. So on a purposeful day, I got up when the alarm went off the first time, took time to eat breakfast, got in the car with plenty of time to have a peaceful commute. I walked into work, and because I had time, I was able to greet my colleagues. I then headed out to car line duty. I usually like to be out in the car loop greeting students in the morning. It helps me connect with each one. But approximately 10 minutes before the first bell, I saw a car cut across the car loop and parked diagonally on the side. A father and his kindergartner ran through the morning traffic, dodging moving cars. When I stopped the father to remind him of the procedure and inform him that his actions were unsafe, his face grew red, and he angrily told me that he was in a hurry to get to work. And then he shouted, "I don't get to just stand out here and watch cars go by all morning. Why don't you get a real job?" I quickly asked an older student to walk the kindergartner to class. I took a deep breath and told the father that I could see he was frustrated. I let him know that the car line is usually shortest about 15 minutes before the bell, and that we have wonderful, very responsible bus drivers if using the bus would save him some time. I agreed to send the bus schedule home with his child in case he wanted to consider it. I did not fret about that father the rest of the day. I was able to focus on my intention of increasing student engagement with no regret. I did an observation in a first grade class and looked for ways to give the teacher helpful feedback on her level of student engagement within the lesson. I talked to some students about some science projects that they were very engaged in. I went to my meeting that afternoon and was able to focus on the content and even look for the resources given for anything that may help increase student engagement at my school. At the end of the day, I felt energized. My ability to control my reaction to the father and remain focused on my intention not only benefited my students, it benefited my own well-being, and I took a better person home to my family at the end of the day. Think about days when you acted purposefully and days when you did not. Missy will give you some strategies for understanding what gets you off track. Next.
It has taken me a long time, a very, very long time, to understand my triggers. And after years and years of leadership and some life experience, I'm almost getting there. But like Julie says, we teach what we most need to learn, and that is very true for me. After 10 years of principaling, I'm still working on being a proactive leader and determining my own sense of urgency with less reaction and leading with more purpose. But first, you have to understand what your triggers are. So think about the last time you were upset. How did it feel? Today was a pretty busy Monday in our district. Report cards went home. You can imagine the phone calls that you get after report cards go home. We also had an early release day, and it poured down rain. So there were plenty of opportunities to recognize triggers today. How did that feel when you were triggered? What were the circumstances? When did you go from okay to not okay? What is your trigger? I've begun to realize that one trigger for me is when I feel a verbal threat, maybe from parents, from coworkers, from even a person in the grocery store, but that a threat is a trigger, particularly if a parent says they're going to call the district office. I now recognize those signs, and for me it's a very physical reaction that leads to an emotional reaction. A flush starts low, way deep down in my toes, and I can feel it move all the way up into my neck, in my face, and on the top of my head, and then that clouds all rationality I have. In one such instance when I felt triggered, I was working with some teachers for a student who had needed to have some serious discipline in our school. So we contacted his grandmother that he lived with, and I explained to her what the problem was at school that day and how I needed her help and her support in making a homeschool connection so that he could be disciplined appropriately for what happened. The conversation didn't go very well, and Grandma was not going to help us make any homeschool connection on that particular day. So as we continued to talk, and the teachers were there, and I felt the urgency to support my teachers, the grandmother then said, my trigger, she said, I'm going to call the superintendent in the district office. When that happened, I became so frustrated and so angry, and I felt that flush rush all the way from my toes right to the top of my head. But instead of taking a moment to react, out of my mouth came the statement, get a pen. And I told her that over and over again. Get a pen, write this down. I will tell you what to tell the superintendent. I will tell you what to tell the school board. And while a great story that the teachers witnessed that call that day, and they loved to tell the story, it was not necessarily productive to anyone, although I did receive a lot of great pins that year for Christmas. So while still not perfect, remember we teach what we most need to learn. I'm getting better at feeling the trigger when I perceive a threat or when I'm told no, which is another trigger for me. When I feel that rush of blood pressure, I practice a whole new tactic. I listen more and I talk less. I find this place where I can hear what really matters to the other person and what the issue is really about. So it's almost like putting a safety switch on your psyche. You have to understand the outcome and act with purposeful intent. So next. So with that, you have to react slowly. And I really like this quote: "You will never reach your destination if you stop and throw rocks at every barking dog." I know in our roles as school leaders that it begins sometimes as soon as we pull into the parking lot. For many years, I had a teacher that met me each morning at my car door. And it is so easy to allow others to determine your sense of urgency. The PTA president that just needs a moment, the teachers, the students, secretaries, parents, and many times we react immediately to everyone's needs, teaching them how to treat us by responding right away. One time, I was overacting to everyone else's sense of urgency and reacted to a trigger. It was a very, very busy day in the school office. Everyone was running around when a PTA mom came into the front office secretary and told her in a hurried voice that there was something going on in the bushes in front of the school. Well, this upset the secretary very much, as they felt like a man may have been relieving himself in the bushes in front of our school. So they came to find me right away. So I rushed out of the front door, but instead of reacting slowly and taking my time, I responded to everyone's sense of urgency by confronting the man. While I knew exactly who he was one of our grandfathers who was the very first to arrive at dismissal each day. His car was the first car there. And I knew that he was there to pick up his grandchild. I rushed out of the front door and went straight to him and confronted him regarding what the secretary and the PTA president had said to me. Now, he reacted with shock. He couldn't believe that I would say this to him. He said, no, nothing is going on like that here in front of the school. I'm just simply collecting all of the balls and the equipment that were thrown over the fence from the playground so I can throw them back over. I was so embarrassed and ashamed that I let other people's sense of urgency determine that conversation with that grandfather that day. So I had to come to a place where I determined the urgency. Not the parents, not the secretaries, the teachers, but me. And now one strategy I use, and you can use this along with me, especially after a busy Monday in school, is to get comfortable. So you go ahead and get comfortable.
I'm getting comfortable.
All right, good. Julie's going to do it too. And then I try to take deep breaths before I rush out the door to confront grandparents or anyone else. So breathe in for 4. So breathe in with me. 2, 3, 4. Now hold it. Now let it out for 2. We can do that one more time. So breathe in for 4. Hold it. Now let it out for 2. So you can feel yourself reacting. You can scan your body, feel where your tension is, where is your stress, so that you can slow down that reaction and you can act with more purpose and more intention. Next.
So while you're being mindful to avoid reacting and instead respond thoughtfully, as Missy said, you need to make sure that you are planning really effectively so that you can enact those 5 key practices throughout your day. Ralph Marston says what you do today improves all of your tomorrows. So those little things that you do each day have a big impact over time. Just as we encourage our teachers to plan with backward design, we must also plan with the end in mind. This is valuable in both long-term and short-term planning. Long-term planning over the course of a year, semester, or quarter requires a vision of what you want the school to become. You can take the big goals and break them into chunks. Calendar the important events, calendar progress checks along the way, and formatively assess your progress as you go. Short-term planning for a week or even a day also needs some vision. Consider, how do you want the day to flow? And how do you want to feel at the end of the day? Looking over your plan for the next day before you leave allows you to make sure it's aligned with your vision and your intention. ensure that there are no scheduling conflicts, and that no preparations have been left undone. Next. So here's an example of a planning template I use. You're going to get our contact information later in the slideshow, and so if you would like a blank one of these, we'd be happy to share it with you. Understand that school leaders have different preferences for calendars and the planning tools they use, and the prettiness of the plan is not important, just the usefulness. I prefer this pencil and paper plan because I like to add notes and reflections and be able to look back on it. That may be helpful to you, but whatever type of planning tool you prefer, make sure that it's focused on your intention. So first, notice my purposeful scheduling focused on my intention of student engagement. You can see that highlighted in yellow when I observed in the morning in Miss Sadler's class, had feedback coaching with Miss Treese, and then even when in the afternoon I met with the 3rd grade PLC. Also notice the buffer time I put in around 11, midday, for unexpected tasks, because those things are sure to come up. A parent phone call or a sudden request for information from the district can really derail you if you haven't included time for that in your day. And lastly, highlighted in green, notice that I schedule times to check email and messages. I turn off my alerts because hearing the ping and going in and checking an email when I should be doing something else is a surefire way for me to get derailed. So consider turning off your alerts so you can control the information coming into you so that you run your day and not the other way around. I like a to-do list with tasks for the day at the bottom of my planning page, and I like to categorize my tasks as important or urgent. So important tasks move the school forward. They're tied to my vision or intention. Urgent tasks are time-bound, often with consequences for not completing them, but they may or may not also be important, tied to the vision or purpose. In fact, often these urgent tasks are tied to someone else's priorities, the superintendent, the State Department, and so consider where some urgent but not important tasks can make great opportunities for emerging leaders. Reflect on some of those tasks you could offer to others and grow their skills and their leadership and add a little more time to your day. We often identify tasks to add to our plans as we carefully observe around the school, and Missy has some great tips and strategies to help with that. Next.
So how do you take the pulse of your school? Do you use data? Do you use the survey of the climate of your school? What about more immediate data collection, the kind that involves immersing yourself and observing what's going on around you? Tony Robbins has an activity that I think is a lot of fun, and we're going to try it now. So it's sitting in the room that you're in, look around the room and count how many green things that you see. Anything that's the color green. So just keep looking around at items that are green. Okay, now shut your eyes. How many red things did you see? Oh,
You're so tricky.
I know. You probably can't even think of the red things that you saw because you were too busy looking for green things. And the point to that is that you only see what you're looking for. So you're seeing only what you are telling your brain to see and predetermining what you'll find. So be open-minded when you're observing and listening carefully and look for other colors. Now, one strategy I use that I learned from Julie is to not just visit classrooms during the day, but to also do those classroom walkthroughs after the school day, after all of the kids have gone home and the teachers are in each other's rooms and they're having those conversations about their day and then engaging them. And it's at that time I've noticed that they'll tell me the things that are important to them, the things that are concerning them, the students they want me to check on, and it's in a much more comfortable situation than it is on those walkthroughs when you come in with the clipboard and their spines stiffen as soon as you walk in, and they're not necessarily going to tell you everything they want you to know. Another way to do that is to walk through the teacher's lounge during lunchtime. What's going on in there? Listen carefully to what they're saying to each other and to you. And also the sidewalk talk is another favorite. I know that my teachers love to stop me on the sidewalk. They like to share things and share greetings. You can find out who's congregating and what they're saying, and they can tell you the simple things like they're worried about a child that didn't eat breakfast or hasn't been in school in a few days, or even the big things like nasty emails from parents. But the key is to listen to what they're telling you so that you can lead with purpose, knowing what's going on around you. But then what do you do with all of that feedback? Julie has some great ideas for feedback. Next.
I know when Misty walks around, she often carries a small notebook, and as she observes things or notices things or people share with her, she can quickly jot down a note and go back and make sure she follows up on that. So observing and listening carefully is essential to getting feedback as well. We must constantly seek feedback in the form of progress checks and formative data, making sure that we are on the path to realizing our intention. And we also need to make sure that we address any issues before they become crises. Oprah explains it best. The universe speaks to us first in whispers. If we don't pay attention to the whispers, it gets louder. Consider the example of a school we recently read about where ignoring feedback about an issue related to supervision led to a crisis. So in this school, a few staff members had expressed concerns about the supervision of some intellectually disabled students during less structured times of the day, such as lunch and recess. One staff member mentioned to the exceptional student specialist that they didn't have a plan to ensure coverage when staff members were absent. Another staff member reported to an administrator that the paraprofessionals responsible for supervising some of these students were often talking to each other or on their telephones. Because these concerns were not addressed, one of the students wandered off at recess and ended up in a dangerous situation. So procrastinating or ignoring these issues led to a crisis in this school. This doesn't mean that we should let others determine the priorities or determine what's urgent for us, but it does mean that we need to pay attention and we need to seek input and feedback. If you want honest input and feedback from staff members and stakeholders, you have to develop a culture of trust where feedback is valued and used. It's human to feel conflicted about feedback. We all have the need to be loved and accepted just the way we are, but we also have the need, a sometimes conflicting need, to grow and improve. Because of this, people may not offer feedback unless you ask for it, accept it with gratitude, and use it. Leaders model the importance of seeking and valuing feedback for their staff members. Think about the tools and strategies that you currently use to seek feedback. Are you getting adequate information from these? Is it useful? Might this feedback help you assess your use of the 5 key practices? Next. Consistently seeking feedback and using it is challenging. Rumi said it best, if you are irritated by every rub, how can you ever be polished? Being a leader requires accepting that not everyone will understand, embrace, or agree with you. Let's consider this analogy. How is a school leader like a swan? To those observing us, it looks so easy and smooth, but we know that under the surface we're paddling as fast as we can, constantly adjusting to the changing conditions in our schools. Because challenges are a part of the principal role, we must not just accept them, but embrace them and begin to look at them as opportunities to grow and learn. Challenges can also be opportunities to seek stakeholder input. let's consider some of our recent challenges as principals. At my school, we serve many children with physical impairments and other disabilities. We needed to more fully include all children in the regular curriculum and classrooms. Working through this challenge resulted in our staff becoming more knowledgeable and skilled at differentiating instruction. We're definitely stronger in instruction and better able to reach all students because we embrace this challenge. We are also challenged by changing demographics. Our percentage of economically disadvantaged students has nearly doubled over the past 3 years. Working through this challenge has resulted in examining old assumptions, changing teaching practices, and even changing the format and content of some of our faculty meetings to better meet the needs of all of our kids. And then one additional challenge that both Missy and I face is our growing number of total students, but not a growing number of classrooms. So we've had an experience with learning and leveraging the benefits of co-teaching, and we've used this challenge to our advantage and found some unique ways to really positively impact student learning at our schools. Next. You're better able to embrace challenges when you feel healthy and strong as a leader. Note that you're always somewhere on the energy continuum from depleted and disengaged to energized and engaged. And your effectiveness as a leader depends on your ability to move yourself in the right direction on the continuum. When you find yourself in a negative state, identify strategies that can help you move to a more positive place. I know for both of us, music can do that. Anything upbeat with inspiring lyrics, particularly 70s satellite radio, highly recommended. Movement is always a good way to move yourself to a more positive state. You may need to take a break, take a brisk walk, close your door and dance. Both of us have incorporated dancing at faculty meetings when we feel like the whole staff is down on the wrong side of the continuum. And just anything that pulls a sense of fun out. Take a trip to kindergarten, join students on the playground, turn the jump rope. That's sure to move you in the right direction. Remember that your well-being is like a three-pronged stool, consisting of a healthy body, mind, and soul. Neglecting any of these can cause things to fall apart. So make sure you nourish your body with daily exercise, lots of water, and incorporate some green veggies. Make sure you nourish your mind by monitoring your self-talk. I know we often talk to ourselves in ways that we would never talk to anyone else at our school. So watch that voice in your head who likes to use words like always and never. You always do that, you never do this. And nourish your soul with some quiet moments, especially on those really hectic days. Quiet moments of reflection can move you back to the right state to lead. Consider what media you choose, especially in the morning before you head to work. Sometimes watching the news is not always best, depending on where you're at that morning. So take a moment and think about one action step you're committed to take this week to keep yourself on the right side of the continuum. Missy, I know you would agree that when you can embrace challenges from a healthy state, you're better able to lead authentically.
Absolutely. And
Next.
one activity that I use to keep myself from being depleted and disengaged is at faculty meetings, we always end with tell me something good. So we play a catchy song, tell me something good, and then three people have to share something good, whether it's in their personal life, their professional life. And I did that more for myself than anyone else because I was feeling depleted and disengaged and not connected to my faculty. And then it's turned into a really fun activity with our music, and we do dance. We dance a lot at our school. Okay, next.
So this is a great quote and a great slide for transition. Remember, everyone has a fire inside. Leadership's role is throwing gas on it. So if you can not only get yourself moving in the right direction, but you can put that in the hearts and minds of those you lead, then you've got a powerful culture going at your school. Next.
And when I think of that fire, I think of a principal that I worked for when I was a new teacher who really embodied authentic leadership. And I love that Todd Whitaker says that the principal is the filter for whatever happens in the school. And being the filter helps us to focus our attention, to lead with purpose, which is ultimately the pathway to positive health and leadership. And remember that question, who wants to lead with less stress and more passion? Well, marketing guru Michael Hyatt writes that authentic leaders have insight, a vision made with wisdom and discernment, initiative, they go first, they exert influence, which is like influenza or the flu because real leaders are contagious, they have impact, and they exercise integrity. Authentic leaders lead from a place of influence and not power, and that's how they light that fire. Now, the best leader I ever worked for as a new teacher was Mr. Green, and he truly modeled what authentic leadership is. He led from a position of influence. He could get you to do anything. He made all of us feel like we were the person that could change the world for the children that we taught each day, and that what we did truly mattered, and we worked really hard for him. He trusted us with the information of the school, and he did all of the things that Michael Hyatt writes about. I've also worked for other leaders that really did the opposite, and I've learned a lot from them as well. But one leader in particular reacted quickly, maybe knew the triggers but ignored them, led from a position of power, kept the secrets of the school secret. She planned proactively, but because she didn't listen carefully or take the pulse of the school, many of those proactive plans had less meaning for the faculty and ultimately the school and its stakeholders. So think for a minute about your Mr. Green, that leader that was really there to ignite your fire and bring out the best in you. What worked for that leader? How did they influence you? And think of the other leader, the leader that led with power. Authentic leadership is really when what we say and what we do are aligned, and using our influence to empower people as a way to empower others. Next.
So as principals, sometimes difficult things are going to happen. In fact, definitely difficult things are going to happen. So you may have to set a timer on some days and limit the time you allow yourself to feel bad about them, and then move on to a problem-solving role. Emerson noted that for every moment you remain angry, you give up 60 seconds of peace. Perseverating on events usually stems from worry, anger, or guilt, sometimes based on faulty assumptions about the possible severity of the consequences or the worst-case scenario, based on faulty assumptions about the intentions of others, that maybe they set out to harm us or ruin our day. So let's stop giving away our peace because of these faulty assumptions. And remember, guilt stems from the feeling that we could have or should have acted differently. Reducing emotional reactions will surely limit regret, but we also have to forgive ourselves and learn from our mistakes. Innovative leaders make mistakes. If we're not making mistakes, we're not truly leading. And we can model how to forgive ourselves and let go and move on for those we lead. I love the way that Missy compares our role to a roller coaster ride.
I definitely feel like it's a roller coaster. And you know, here in Florida we have a lot of theme parks, and at the end of those roller coasters they show you the picture they snapped of you while you were riding the ride. So I was telling Julie the story of a time I took my son when he was about 10 or 11 years old to Universal Studios along with my friend and her 10 or 11-year-old son, and we were riding this ride called The Mummy. Now, this is what made me think that our jobs are really like roller coasters, because as we were riding the ride, you get into the mummy, ride, and you're in the cart, and it's a nice slow ride, and we were all sitting in the front row, and then you're in the, like a temple, or like the pyramids, and riding through, and it's nice and slow, and it's dark, and it's telling a story. But then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this ride came to a screeching halt. It turned around, did all kinds of turns. A flaming skull came out, and you could feel the heat, and the ride was on from there. And then it was up and down and all around, and definitely was not what it started off to be. My favorite part of that ride is at the end, when we got to go see the picture that they had snapped, where you have my friend and I clinging on to each other for dear life. You have her son, who's hanging on with a look of shock on his face, and then you have my son with his hands straight up in the air, having the ride of his life. So when I tell Julie it's definitely like a roller coaster, you have to choose how you're going to ride it. Are you going to ride it hanging on to each other, or hanging on to the bar, scared to death, or with your arms in the air and just enjoying the ride?
I think we've all had those days when suddenly we're down a sharp incline with the flaming skull.
Yes.
So go ahead to next. Here's a review of our purposeful practices and how they can help ignite your consistent use of the 5 keys. And some closing thoughts. Please take a moment to consider these closing thoughts as we prepare to take your questions.
Julie and Missy, I want to thank you and applaud you for giving us some wonderful ideas. I don't think I will ever look at a brand new principle again without thinking about your image of a duck with everything looking smooth on the surface and the little feet just paddling away. What an absolutely great analogy of what our work is like and how we react to the things around us in our worlds. So thank you so much. We do have some questions that have come through, and I would like to share those with you and get your responses.
Great. Thank you, Carol.
One is, and the analogy of looking back at those 5 key practices around academic success and a hospitable climate and school culture and developing leadership in others, being a role model in the role that you've just described that a principal should hold is really important in cultivating leadership in others. Managing people, certainly. We are not able to do that unless we look at the purposeful principling that you have just shared with us through your wonderful stories. Now, this question relates to it, and you can make that connection for us. This principal said, I am daily micromanaged by my supervisor. And I really want to tell her that this is occurring and how I'm feeling, but I see our discussion as a potentially difficult and really risky conversation. What would be your suggestions for approaching my supervisor?
That's a tough question. I think we have 2, and one we agree on and do fairly stealthily, but we'll admit publicly here, called creative non-compliance, which means sometimes you have to do things in a way that doesn't take time away from your intentions, and so you filter a little bit for your school based on the way you enact things. But the other is share your powerful intention with the person supervising you and talk to them about how you're trying to bring that intention into reality through all of these practices in the way that you're planning for your day. And some people, I know I do, make their calendar and daily schedule public so people know what I'm working on and how I'm using my time. How about you, Missy?
I would agree. That's why I like that Todd Whitaker quote so much about being the filter for the school, because we also experience a lot of times here in our district where we are micromanaged, and we do have to filter all of those intentions for our teachers so that they can focus on the work at hand with working with our students. Sometimes it's difficult to have those conversations with people that are supervising you, but by listening to what their message is to you and then filtering that and then responding back to them, like Julie said, I think you can make things more transparent and tell them what you need as a school principal, which will maybe help them be less, micromanaging as a supervisor.
Carol, that wasn't either of our assistant principals who sent that in, was it?
Great. That's good to know. Well, we do have another question that came in from one of our participants by the name of Mary, and she is finishing her leadership program to receive her license. So she's thinking about what this means in terms of her next job. And as you describe these soft skills, I don't think you come into the principalship with knowing them, that you learn them on the job and you practice them every day. It's not a matter of having them and not having them. It's a continuum of growth for you. So when I look at her question, she is asking, do you recommend that I look at an assistant principal's job first or apply directly for a principal's job? How would you respond to that?
Well, I know that for me personally, that being an assistant principal and working for the leader I worked for, I learned so much that I took into my principalship. So for me, I really think having that assistant principal experience was very helpful. And definitely part of how we grow leaders here in our district through that role.
And I think if that's not an option, an assistant principalship, then it's important to find a principal mentor, and you can start that before you even move into a leadership role, and have them talk to you about why they make the decisions they do and really explicitly reflect on their practice. So think aloud like we do with kids when we read. Do some think alouds with you and talk about the decisions they have to make and then the actions they decide to take.
And and that's something that hopefully you'll do for your entire career. Julie and I spend a lot of time talking to each other, talking through situations that happened. And I know as a new principal, I remember how challenging it was, and no, you don't go in with all of these different skill sets to how to handle these problems. There were a lot of days I shut the door and had to remind myself I was the captain and in charge, so I am the captain. But I think that those experiences as an assistant principal or through a principal mentor are a great way to get started.
Great. And I want to put a plug in for the National Association of Elementary School Principals mentor program. That's really a great way to continue your growth and have somebody give you the feedback that you have an open attitude about receiving. So many of your stories really reflect soft skills, or what we often call in our professional lives those soft skills. And those are very critical skills in any job, but they're talked about much more so in the business world. So I was glad to hear you talk about resiliency and adaptability and critical observation. The emotional regulation, I think, is something so important for a leader as well. Persistence, perseverance, being perceptive about other people's feelings and not reacting, all extremely important. And your quote by Oprah saying, pay attention to the whispers. I want to remind everyone that listen, L-I-S-T-E-N, has the same letters as silent, S-I-L-E-N-T. And that's a great thing to post on your wall and have and look at as those triggers come into your life.
That's great. Missy's writing that down.
I am.
That's how we learn from each other. I love it. I love it. Well, I want to thank you so much, Missy and Julie. You've done a wonderful, wonderful job. And audience, you may take Missy and Julie's email address, I'm sure that they would very, very much enjoy hearing from you.
Yes, we would.
We would.
And as a very final note to this webinar this evening, I would like you to know that we do have one more webinar in our series. It is on February 18th from 4 to 5 o'clock, and I have to say Missy and Julie have created quite a high bar for all of us, so please join us for our final webinar. And our final thought is this quote, and I want all of you to think about this tonight. We are fortunate to work in an honorable profession where we have the power, the ability, and the compassion necessary to make the world a better place. Thank you and have a great evening.